Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for soul growth. Come journey with us through astrology's energetic cycles and get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sue Rose Minahan. This is Talk Cosmos. Today is July 8th, and our subject is going to be Jupiter in Cancer, emotional growth. And wouldn't you know, it's going to be tomorrow. I'm just like over the moon, as they say. And the moon is really centerpiece because the moon is what rules Cancer. And amazingly, it's what personalizes our human experience. And more than that, it makes it the mysterious, and it's a powerful entity. There's so much mythology about both Jupiter and the moon. And we're touching on a whole realm of information that I hope tweaks all your imagination as the year goes on, because really the moon is the quickest moving motion in our solar system, and we'll have a chance daily to review how we're feeling about this presence in our life. We are ready for Planet Buzz.
Focusing on perspectives of pattern planet cycle relationships and understanding their archetypal energy consciousness, reflecting through history, current events, mythology, and philosophical questions, these are the members of Planet Buzz.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, founder of Talk Cosmos since 2018. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, consultant, speaker, writer, vibrational astrology student, Dwarf Planet University graduate, Kepler Astrology Toastmasters Club charter member. I have a fine arts music degree plus a certificate in jazz. I'm an artist, musician, and certified color energy life coach. Especially, I love mythology and esoteric philosophies.
And I'm Dr. Now.Chat. I work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with students and clients around the world. As a counselor, writer, and educator, I love helping people recognize their inner strengths, take advantage of auspicious moments, and navigate times of challenge with greater ease. On my own podcast, Mythic Sky Storytime, I discuss astrology, mythology, and actualizing our full potential. Learn more at mythicsky.com.
Plus, a special guest who we will introduce in just a short moment.
And as the ancient Hermetic code reveals,
as below, so above. As above, so below.
Hello, Laura, Dr. Tad. Once again, we're on.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Good to see you again.
It is. It seems like when spring happens, it's so much excitement with birthing and the birds and the sunlight. It's just really dramatic. And in this season, we're having this tremendous shift of dominoes. I think, planetary dominoes. Maybe that's a good name for a game, huh? I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it's a busy month. I gave a talk on about a week ago, and just the number of ingresses that we've got this month. A lot of change.
Yes. We have an exciting guest, Louise Eddington. That's Edington. And Louise is here once again. She was here with us in February about Venus and will be coming back in September about the eclipse. Hi, Louise.
Hi, nice to be back. I always enjoy talking.
Oh, we love it. And it's a real treat. Louise has her own show that's very frequent. She gives a lot of information. So look at her. Well, she writes prolifically. And in fact, let's find out about Louise. Louise Eddington, the Cosmic Owl, a wisdom weaver, astrologer, consultant, teacher, author, blog writer, and she has a workshop class. In fact, she has one going on right now about Venus, this Venus star point, which started, I believe, in March, but there'll be another one in 19 months because she's certified and it really gives this great in-depth experience. She is a shamanic guide, a symbologist, and
And I've just written another book, and I'm publishing it in July on Dwarf Planet series. So,
goody! I love that. I just did one with Melissa Elvira Billington. We did ones on the octaves with Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. It was so, yes, I would love to talk with you sometime about that. I'd love to have a whole panel, in fact, about the dwarfs. Fabulous. What would be the name of it?
Series. I can't remember the full title. Sorry.
We'll look for it. That's excellent.
Series in astrology, and then there's a subtitle. So
okay. Well, she is a wonderful dwarf planet. Walked the Earth. I love that. Thank you. Well, thank you for being with us. Well, let's begin with a little mythology. And I know that's right up Laura's alley, too. It's all three of us, because Jupiter, which is the Roman equivalent of Zeus, the Greek form, and there's a family tree. Jupiter was the god of the sky and thunder, the father and king of gods and men, as it's been put, of law. But he was the son of Saturn, time, and the grandson of Uranus, the heavens. And his one and only child that he produced, although the mother was Metis, but that's the whole mythology, isn't it? Because he swallowed her. He was really the story of what goes around comes around, because in the family tree, the sons had disposed of their fathers one way or the other, power, so that they could have power. But it's really an evolution. But he didn't want that to happen, so he swallowed his wife Metis, who he had made into a fly. Which I really have to look at the totem of the fly. Have either of you done that? I have not done that, but I'm curious. There's got to be something amazing about the fly. At any rate, she burst from his head Athena, strategy, wisdom. So sometimes I think if evolution matters, his best idea might be that somehow we have wisdom and free will. We have the wisdom of making our free will, right? That's really part of Zeus. So I have spoken quite a bit, but do either of you have, I meant to have it be a conversation. Sorry. Do you have thoughts?
Not at this point, no.
Okay. Well, the archetype, again, it's growth and it's abundance, exaggeration, wisdom, joy, all of that.
Yeah, I mean, Jupiter is in that expansion energy, right? That there's nothing small, right? There's nothing small about it. And physically, it's the largest planet in the solar system, right? So that's part of that grandiosity that we have with Jupiter.
And he's it's a big gas giant, the planet. So, gas and hot air can be a big theme of Jupiter as well.
Yeah. It's the same elements as our sun, but I was reading that it isn't a large enough mass in order to actually be a star. And there's thought that it was created when the sun was created, kind of from leftover energies. I mean, leftover helium and hydrogen. But with the moon that rules Cancer, here we have a lot more happening. It's a combination of what we're going to be dealing with. Go ahead and.
Yep. Well, yeah, I mean, all of those things listed there, but, there's a lot about homecoming and ancestry as well, and lineage and family systems, themes of Jupiter in Cancer, emotional expansion and expansion of intuition and kind of your gut knowing, I always think, with Cancer, because Cancer rules the stomach. So, it should be mainly a really good transit, because Jupiter is very happy in the sign of Cancer. It likes to be there, but everything always has its highs and shadow as well. So there's going to be all kinds of things coming up that we'll speak about all the way through, right?
It's true. And I think of that attachment, because Cancer, as being a crab with those big pinchers, just hangs on. It's a safety thing. It's like theirs. It's a protection. It's everything. So I think when you're speaking of this evolution of our emotions, which is really going to happen, is can we let go of what we believe to be the story, our nurturing story? But there's
and there's a mama bear quality that Cancer can have too. That is that fierce protector of loved ones, fierce protector of children and family, right? So it is not necessarily that loving, kind, smushy, nurturing. It can also be that pincher Cancer clause, right? That I will hurt anyone who hurts people I love, can be a side of that archetype. And then you merge that with Jupiter, and then it's on a large scale.
Yeah. Which reminds me, I just heard too, hurt people. And I thought, I like that, because really, as Louise and you're both saying, Laura, this whole year is going to be a whole redefinition of how we can use our intuition and which we will go into more about how to reform our emotional patterns so that they nourish us. It begins tomorrow. We may be listening to this later, but I know there's ones that are with us right now, and that will be June 9th. And for Eastern time, that's in the evening, 5:01. And there will be a retrograde that's in November at 25 degrees Cancer. It stays in Cancer for this entire retrograde. I was noticing that there's only 2 retrograde patterns in Cancer since the 1900s began, and once was in 65 and the other was 89. But they both went, let me think, one of them was at 0 degrees, so it went back into Gemini, and the other one I think stayed in Cancer in 89. But anyway, it goes station direct at 15 degrees on March 10th, and then it leaves on the 30th of June. And there is a pre-shadow and a post-shadow, and you can look at that. So it's a whole year that we have coming up until the end of next June. Looking at the seed chart, which is our springboard, which Greenwich time, the world clock, as far as we've taken our mortal time on Earth, is in the evening at 9:01:50 seconds. So you could say 9 o'clock or 9:02. And Jupiter is right close to Mercury, which is no surprise, but it is. Actually, Mercury is a long distance from the sun. Go ahead, Louise.
Oh, because as we record this, Jupiter and Mercury are meeting at the last degree of Gemini. So that's bringing a little bit of a flavor of what we've got to come, I think, and what we're finishing up.
And that's Tisha, isn't it? 29 degrees and 1. So we're really a strong connection with it. But Jupiter, I think when I look at this chart, Pluto is so dynamic. And what does Pluto represent but change? And so it's asking us to really open up and bring in that gut level, that intuition, that emotional content, that language our body wants to know. That sometimes our mind goes like, yeah, but that's just how I feel. I can rationalize it. No, it's important.
Jupiter's really kind of under quite a lot of pressure, really, on this ingress chart. Being the focal point of that finger of fate, or yod, or finger of God, whatever you want to call it, from the moon and Pluto, especially because the moon is the ruler of Cancer. And then that almost immediate square to Saturn, and then Neptune. It's a very big moment for it to go in. I think really, it's we're going to get a really big idea of what changes are going to come pretty quickly, in my opinion. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and then we just look what's happening in the world at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
This is reflective of the bigness of this moment, and what's being said, who's speaking, what's being communicated is a huge part of the story. I think having Jupiter and Mercury so close together,
it is
with this, and how do we communicate caring? How do we give people who gets to speak?
Yes, and really Jupiter always, it's a Sagittarius quality, but needs to voice its opinion. Yes. So, it's not like Mercury that needs to work their thoughts through as they talk, but there is a belief system with Sagittarius, or, its ruler, it's in Cancer. So it's important. And I think the struggle between the Cancer and Aries, for instance, with that Saturn and Neptune, is how do you choose the value of how you want to nurture with what you want to protect, and who really belongs in the family, and et cetera, et cetera.
And, with that moon in Sagittarius being Jupiter guided, of course, as well, they're in mutual reception. So, it's we see it, what's happening in LA today and things like that. So,
but Jupiter wants to make an impact. So I guess really, as I as I feel about this, it's like, okay, fine. So it's not taking a backstage. It's saying, yes, I'm here.
Yes.
So we'll see how we're going to deal with it. There is what they call a Thor's hammer in astrology. It's a moving dynamic. It's changing because it's action. It comes up with a square and a half. That's 90 and 45 degrees. So it's a focal planet that's driving the energy. And because it's in that position to two planets that are already in an action-oriented square. So this is happening twice with this particular seed plant. It's a planet. Jupiter and Mercury are one in that square, as we were talking about, with Saturn and Neptune, which are which represent really what's essential in the greater mystical, what makes life magic, which is very spiritual. And Juno, who's really the spouse of Jupiter, in our world, we think of relationships and not just relationships, but partnerships. What's our alliances? So really, for me, the idea is, yes, go to that intuition, go to what is unseen. Let's not just think we're the king of the highway. We have alliances that are helping.
Well, plus Juno in Scorpio, Scorpio can be a bit about power and powerlessness, or disempowerment, and Thor's hammers. I love Anne Otley's phrase for it, that Thor's hammers smite. It's like, and all these things have both yin and yang to them, as we've mentioned, and. We see Juno, I see as sacred contracts with each other, all our kind of relationships. And so we see a lot of people's sacred contracts with each other, and our inner sense of personal power being smited, but also that will produce kind of the standing up for yourself and coming from your inner power to stand up for yourself and for others. So, yeah.
I like that. Laura, shall we?
Yeah. No, I think that
okay.
That's, again, some of what we're seeing in the news is people standing up for each other. That's how it's quite literally manifesting, in front of us right now.
Exactly, because people's sense of safety and security is being threatened. So, yeah.
And coming up shortly in a week is this, which is a major aspect. Again, these two planets, Jupiter and Saturn, are going to be in a not natal, what am I trying to say? And they're in a square, and that's action oriented. It's the first time since they were together back in 2020, which is a grand conjunction, which spawned this 200-year cycle of these social planets every 20 years being in air instead of Earth, which is such a different materialism. I mean, materialism in Earth versus the connecting unseen aspects of air.
Yeah. And, it's an opening square, as you say. It's first square since that grand conjunction, which was actually that grand mutation, as you also. And I see this isn't going to be a really interesting dance. It's more than just the square, because then later in the year, both Jupiter and Saturn will go retrograde, and Saturn will go back into Pisces, and Jupiter is the traditional guide for the sign of Pisces. And then Jupiter will go retrograde as well in Cancer. And you know that they will, not on the same day, but very close to each other, Jupiter will station retrograde and Saturn will station direct at exactly the same degree and minute of the two water signs in a trine to each other. These two are going to speak to each other this whole transit, this whole year, really. And it is expansion and contraction, but Jupiter's kind of moving forward faster than Saturn. So I kind of feel like there's going to be a lot of expansion and growth through this, and moving away from a lot of the old restrictions and rules and structures. So
yes, deconditioning and redefining. Laura? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, well, and I think in general, with squares, I think that because Jupiter can be too big, right? And some of the benefit of that, particularly with it being Saturn as a square, is to rein that in a little bit, to put on some guardrails so that we don't get too big for our britches. So we don't go because another shadow with Sag Jupiter is that so optimistic, we're not realistic. And that square, I think, will help us to be measured in our expansion, which actually will really serve us, so that we can have, even though Jupiter's in a water sign, there's almost like a grounding quality to that, to have that tension held, to be able to expand, but only so much, expand within limits. And I think that's actually really going to be a benefit in these coming months.
Well,
as we navigate the waters.
It might be because Jupiter is also a midpoint. It's a little rocky there as exact. But look at Uranus, a sudden awakener that is moving forward like 2 days. Well, just after, on July 7th, it's entering Gemini. And both of these are at near anaretic degrees, because I think it's 2859 Taurus, but for Uranus. But look at Mars there. So Jupiter, when you get Uranus and action, that's it. It's like it's the potpourri of popcorn happening. Boom, 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 boom. So I think there's so many. We live in an age of information and interjections. It's like a small town gone vast, where we can hear, and so it's going to get complicated. So yes, it'll be interesting to see how this all works.
I completely agree with you too, Laura, because I have Jupiter in Sagittarius, in a massive Sagittarius stellium, but I also have Saturn in Capricorn in the first house. And Saturn does exactly that. I kind of feel it's like that gentle hand saying, slow down, patience.
Well, it is interesting because I have a relationship too between those two planets in a yod, and they're ones that are very particular that are like in conjunct. And right now, Pluto's on my Jupiter. So I think, yes, it's saying, you know what? You have great ideas, but unless you temper them and get them to work materially with your analytical Saturn, it's just going to be there fluffing, right. Here, we have a couple of minutes before we break away. But the United States, this is on the inside with Jupiter on the outside. And for this nation, because it is a dynamic event, we're a Cancerian nation, but Jupiter will be coming up with, I think I have here, a Jupiter return on the 5th, but we have that retrograde that we'll see coming up too, which will be interesting because what happens with the retrograde is that it starts right on our thinking Mercury, that's in November, and then when it ends in March next year, it'll be on our sun. But back to our
well, and so, but even if we get the Jupiter return on the 5th, then we basically have a solar return and a Jupiter return in the solar return chart.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. I mean, give a day or a couple of half a degree, but we basically have Jupiter a Jupiter return in the solar return. So even after it's moved away, we're still in it as a nation, because it's in the solar return chart.
And isn't it interesting that in that chart for that moment, Mars is opposing Pallas Athena, who's Jupiter's daughter, and the USA is also having a Pallas Athena return in Aquarius. So it's could the USA be under any more pressure? But it's going through a rebirth, really. That's
And it stands to reason because we just finished our Chiron return every 50 and a half years, that wounded alchemist. And that was a pretty dynamic thing. It was 3. It went retrograde and back. And so the last one, I think, was in February. Yes. And so to have that wisdom strategy returned, I think that cycle for those planets, I'm just thinking as an asteroid, is about several hundred years. So this isn't just a simple...
for an asteroid, so usually just over 4 years. So their cycle.
4 years. Okay. Thank you. Yes, okay, 4. I'm thinking of the dwarf. Thank you.
Yes, you're. Yeah.
Glad I asked. Thank you. Okay. So it is a reset, but not impossible.
But again, that idea of, you go back to the myth, right? So we have a Jupiter return and a Juno return, or a Pallas return simultaneously, right? So, and then Jupiter being in Cancer, and that idea of family, that idea of ancestry, where do we come from? What are our roots? And what do we take with us, and what do we leave behind, being part of this, part of how do we move forward with that?
Because here are the years, and I know we have to break away because we have so much we want to talk about afterwards, but these are when Jupiter was in Cancer. And I think, Laura, maybe when we come back, or do you want to take a moment now just to share that it was the 1400s or that was with the square?
That was the square. That was the last time that Jupiter and Saturn were square in the same signs. And one thing, it's not necessarily related to this sign, but I found it interesting. It's not on this list, but so in the 89-90 Jupiter in Cancer cycle is when Nelson Mandela was released from prison, and the last one is when he passed.
Oh, yes. And I think that 89 is when the Berlin Wall came down.
Yeah, it's when the Berlin Wall came down, and he was released from prison.
Because Louise has given a talk about this too, and I suppose,
and we're having this battle between East and West again.
Yeah, and interesting that South Africa's back in the news, so it's an interesting parallel.
Well, let's hope our stories can find more unity. That's always the energies that we're working on, and maybe looking at why were these differences and how can we protect and defend all of us as having a right of everything. Let's come back, people. Thank you so much. Talk Cosmos with Jupiter and this is Dr. Laura.Chat and Louise Eddington, the Cosmic Owl. See ya. While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the period of Gemini. By leaving a cycle based on physical form, integrated through spirit, the energy of Gemini connects spirit with matter, focused on communicating and defining the external. Gemini is a mutable air sign signifying flexibility. Gemini dually focuses upon teaching and learning in order to synthesize the world one lives within.
Talk Cosmos brings insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for the soul growth with hour-long programs. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel and Facebook page. While you're there, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons so you get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. And to find out about upcoming programs, sign up for the newsletter at talkcosmos.com. So grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
This is Martha Norwalk every Sunday morning beginning at 9 a.m. Thanks in part to Dr. Nils Rasmussen at healingministryforanimals.com. We cover the world of animals. This week, it's Behavior Training and Healing Sunday with me and talk with your human or animal loved ones on this side or the other, and private readings with Natasha. Hope you can join us and plan to call in with your questions for either one of us. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Talk radio with a purpose. Alternative Talk 1150.
Hi. Welcome back. Louise and Laura, I don't have slides for you in particular, but are there certain events that you want to bring up? Otherwise, please, folks, Louise, it is louiseeddington.com, and she's on Substack and has a YouTube station. Go ahead, Louise, with that.
Yeah, well, though we've talked a little bit about 89, but, there's other, the World Wide Web was born back then as well, during that transit as well. And so there was kind of this new global home of web connection in the 89 to 1990 transit. But then in 2001 to 2002, there was really a big housing market, home values rise, euro currency was launched. There was there was a lot more kind of connections really kind of coming through in so many ways, but also protective homeland security began to be formed under that transit as well, literally home. So, and in the 2013 to 2014 Jupiter in Cancer, that's when Black Lives Matter was born, literally born, and that movement called for ancestral healing and belonging, which are very Jupiter in Cancer words as well. There's so many other things we could talk about, but these are kind of give you an idea of what might occur. Oh, it's interesting you mentioned the McCarthy hearings, and just last night we had that George Clooney.
I saw that. Yes, yes, it was fascinating. And then with the on CBS with the dialogue afterwards.
Yeah.
It was written 20 years ago. Interestingly, and then just. Brought up, so it wasn't like it was created, but that's cancer really, as we understand, with its cycle every 28 days, 29 and a half, as it goes through its phases, has its own processing. When it is ready, it's ready. It's not like Saturn that says the cycle is finished, now produce. It's just the flower or the seed will evolve when the time is right on a personal basis.
I think, and one of the things with these, the social planets where we get to experience their longer cycles, so we can really track them in a way. We're like, well, Mars return happens every 2 years, so okay, but they're frequent enough that we can really track them in our own lives as well. That seeing where we were at in these earlier periods for ourselves, that there's this peeling of the onion. Obviously, it won't be identical, but there may be through lines to what was going on in 2013, 2014 for people, and that so both collectively, what it is echoing, and also individually, what, depending on where it's falling in your own chart, how that is impacting you, or the resonance that you have. For me, the last cycle, it's when I defended my doctoral thesis. That was the last time Jupiter was in Cancer.
That's pretty fundamental.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, Dr. Laura Tad is mythicsky.com. Louise Eddington, as I said, is louiseeddington.com, Substack at louiseeddington.com.
Oh, it's at Cosmic Owl Astrology on Substack, but you'd probably find me by searching my name, so it doesn't matter.
I will. Very good. Cosmic Owl, right there. Astrology. Okay. And myself, you can check on YouTube. We had something about the dwarf planets and octaves, the different planets. There is just to mention once again to folks, there will be a vibrational astrology, very, very reasonable, on Labor Day weekend. It's online. So check it out. Fractal Cosmos. Here, bunches of questions. Jupiter. We get to think and talk, which we have been. And I think it's been many of these ideas, but just something here, instigate a thought. Should we begin here? Like, what feels like home? Because we could devise our own family. But then again, it's blood or not.
Yeah. And I definitely feel that has shown up for me over the previous cycles. Who and what feels like real home. Yeah.
So the last cycle was 2013. That is so true. 2014, because that was just when I began really once again entering. I had always studied astrology, but I began getting active with community. And so I realized, gee, I need some astrology friends. And I'm so glad.
Yeah, well, and I think, with family, it's also finding that who's chosen family versus blood. And that sometimes chosen family is more important to us, or we're closer to often in the modern world. We're closer emotionally to chosen family. I mean, my family's scattered around the world. We're on, if I include cousins, we're on like 4 continents at any given time.
Jupiter at best, both of you guys.
I've got siblings on 3 continents. So physical like chosen family, those are it. And so and again, Jupiter expanding, it could be an expansion of family, of who we think of as family, of member of your family growing potentially, both literally or in terms of chosen family. There being more people in your life that have that family-like quality to you. And with the ancestral piece, it may be a time of doing ancestral healing work that could be very powerful.
Yes.
Because you're able to go, even though Jupiter is expansive, you don't think of it as going deep. There's this expansion of ancestry. And so maybe even doing ancestral work. It could be one of my brothers and I are actively looking at getting our Polish citizenship, so we have access to the EU because our grandparents were Polish immigrants. And so being second generation, we can get Polish citizenship. And we just have to prove that they were born in Poland. And because my only Polish is babcia, which doesn't need just grandma in Polish, but that ancestry, the work we're having to do to prove our lineage. And then, not that I necessarily want to be living in Krakow, but it opens up the EU.
It's an amazing nation. Yeah, what I've seen. Regardless, yes.
So there may be some of that ancestral stuff. I know, actually, I have several friends that are like actively pursuing their ancestral roots to have options to live in other parts of the world. And that may be one of the things that comes out of this period of time.
I think also, though, with it beginning with this square to Saturn at the beginning of the transit, for some people, that may result in kind of leaving behind some of these ancestral patterns and things, exploring them, but kind of putting an end to them, not doing this anymore, kind of thing.
Well, it really does become where is home. And I've often thought it's where I have my hat, wherever my hat's on. In other words, my present moment. And it is interesting. For 10 years, my husband and I traveled off and away from where we'd been raised, because I never was raised where I was born, which is San Francisco. We moved up to Seattle, but I've lived up and down the West Coast. But we went to Mexico and back, and when I returned, I thought, well, I'd never come back, but yet it was so interesting to redefine my roots and my connections. And what I guess I'm getting at is that now, reflecting being in Hawaii, I realize that I carry that within, whether it's where my father immigrated from Norway, or whether, not to give, but, you look at, and besides that, okay, despite where your family is, it's how do you put together your parental roots? The mother and father, they don't necessarily come from the same place. I know over and over again in my family, they come from different countries, and besides different cities, different countries. And so that part of you integrating is you putting that story into some perspective so that you can use it. It's true, putting it to rest, but using and making it a platform that, okay, this is how I see it now. Let's be me on that basis.
It's interesting for me because this Jupiter in Cancer cycle is a full Jupiter cycle of living in this current home, which is the longest I've ever lived in any home. And I actually is probably my most home-like home that I've ever felt like. So there you go. That's very Jupiter in Cancer. So.
That's always a powerfully good way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, it can be physical home, right? Not just metaphorical. Home is if you've been putting off redecorating, that could be a way that expansive Jupiter in Cancer energy could manifest. Is like adding on an addition to your house could be quite a literal manifestation of expansion of home. Could be one of the ways that energy could manifest, is expanding home or second homes, or not just not just people, but what you think of as home.
Or replacing furniture. For instance, the neighbor gave away all her furniture, so I got rid of a little sofa. I have 2 chairs. It's like a whole brand new experience.
It's just giving your home some love, isn't it? And,
caring. That could be that sort of applying feng shui, right? Even if it's not quite literal, it's like what feels good in your home without having to apply a technical quality to it. It's like energetically, because the room feels brighter if the couch is there instead of there. And playing with that, what feels expansive and comforting, because that's part of that Cancerian energy that feels like home is a place that you can drop, that the world has been pretty crazy out there. And so having home feel like it's actually a place that you can retreat to, that you can heal, that you can rejuvenate, I think is going to be an important thing to have over the next year.
I think that comes into this idea, if you can rest, which is really what I've been focused on, that idea of why does where I've moved to for the last years feel like home, really, truly. I think because it does allow one to rest in the sense that you can get into that interior space where you can reach your mystic roots, which I borrowed from what Louise put on one of her slide presentations about this, but because it's a great way to describe our roots on a mystical part that's reclaiming, and this is also what Louise is, the divine feminine, which male or female or bi or whichever, however you describe your sexuality, we have that consciousness within. So being able to explore that and let that illuminate, I think maybe we could discuss that a little bit.
Well, you know, we're seeing, obviously we're seeing, especially in the USA at least, you know, a lot of what you might want to call the feminine energy being kind of under attack. So it goes back to that protective kind of rising up, and you know, people will gather together, I think, in their soul families and stand up for each other, for you know, the feminine in all its forms, to stand up for that and what this family is. And I think we're seeing it with the immigrants too, you know, because, you know, for example, what's happening in California right now, most Californians see those migrants as part of their family because they're very in the community, and they're all out to support them, you know. So I always see all those energies of the feminine. It's that kind of connection, realizing we're all connected, or rather than it being feminine as in female.
I'll just briefly bring in, that reminds me that in the seed chart tomorrow, June 9th, the Pallas Athena return that you were mentioning too with both of us, but Laura, about the fact that reminding she's the daughter of, as we talked about, of Jupiter. So it's that another family, but she is the feminine. And I wonder, with all the asteroids, they might have more of an emphasis because, for instance, the Thor's hammer of that energy exploding out is Juno. It is what is so our alliances, marital or not just marital, but partnership alliances, but representing.
Yeah, well, and yeah, I think that, and Juno she's an ancient goddess. She predates what we think of as the Greek mythology.
A Titan. She's a Titan, I think. Isn't
well, but
she?
Even she predates that mythology when it was a feminine culture. When
she's
it was
all
a temple goddess,
matriarchal goddesses.
She's an ancient goddess. You know, similar to Hecate, who predates the
right.
And so some of the mythology around her in relation to her more ancient manifestation too is, you know, some of the interpretations were that, like, she had agreed to co-lead with Zeus and he reneged, and that's why she's rageful. It's not, oh, she's a jealous woman. She's like, I agreed to co-rulership. This doesn't work.
It's a theme. It's an ancient theme, whether any religion carries that through. Exactly. It's like, and it really gets into the dignity of just every individual. Yes. Thank you.
And so that ancient energy, that ancient feminine energy of caring for each other, of caring for the planet, I think is part of this, of the caretaking of the collective, the caretaking, that idea that, you know, we are all interrelated. And so if we don't take care of the people over here, you know, that we ourselves will suffer. And that's part of the awareness that's coming in is, you know, the famous quote that's tied to the Holocaust of, you know, first they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak out right then. And then they came for me and there was no one left to speak. It's that idea of like caring for the collective is part of how we take care of ourselves. Caring for others is self-care. And understanding that we're all responsible for each other. That, that famous Ram Dass quote of we're all just walking each other home. And that being part of a way of looking at this, how to collectively take care of each other. And the planet, I think, is part of this, even though Uranus is almost out of Taurus, that the impact all of this is having on the planet too, and the choices that are being made and how that impacts us as well.
Yeah.
It really does ask us so many ways of reestablishing opinions, which come from belief systems. And I had to reflect on my life because Jupiter is pretty strong in my chart too. Ninth house sun and etc. And I've learned to rephrase some of my, like I'll get an idea and I'll realize, it sounds like I really know what I'm talking about. I mean, just with my husband or something. And I'll realize, maybe I can say, well, I've come to the conclusion that blah, 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 rather than, this is fact, because that becomes opinion. But nurturing and, oh my goodness, it's going to be a beautiful new womb of experience. It's so personal. It's so processing. I think it's
one other thing I think could be a theme of it is obviously there's so much happening in the world and it's quite upsetting for a lot of people. But Cancer is a very resilient sign. Even though it's quite sensitive. So I think building emotional resilience, probably through coming together with your chosen family to support you, will become a big theme of it as well. So you can weather the storms, if you like. So
that's a beautiful word, resilience. It's the second time somebody's mentioned that. It's really being able to pick yourself up. Like the song, That's Life. I know Frank Sinatra sang that as a kid, but at any rate, pick yourself up.
It's learning how to weather all the things that are happening without it kind of totally taking you down into,
right. And that can be Cancer, right? Cancer can crawl in its shell and be like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm going to go hide over here until all the bad things go away, and then I'll come out to play. And so finding that balance, because sometimes that reclusive energy is actually where you find resilience. You need to go inward. You need to turn away to build up your reservoir to be able to be there for yourselves and others. And so it's that dance of sometimes, like that's why having home that feels like it's where you can decompress. Home being where you can drop. Then you go out in the world and you navigate the chaos, and whether that's directly or indirectly, but then you have somewhere to return to fill up your bucket, to restore. And so you can maintain resilience as opposed to it being, because there's a slippery slope of resilience almost being like a defense. It's like mechanism, right? And how, like, then actually in a fight, flight, freeze response that's appearing like resilience. And so there's a need in the midst of that, able to have that reclusive energy, that mama bear going into the cave and hibernating. And
that perhaps all the new energies from the Aries that is, wanting always to experience a new identity and come up with an instinctive way of becoming, and might shift because that may work and may not work. It's going to be a real dialogue of working and expanding out to new people and contexts. I think this idea that they can both happen. You can have your nucleus family, whatever that might be, and make a family of your own terms where you can be yourself. Thank you, Louise and Dr. Ted, Laura.
Great to be here again.
A great conversation, and We're going to launch. Everybody, may your process be womb fulfilling. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for having me again.
See you again.
Joining an insightful conversation on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests awaken consciousness by connecting soul growth patterns with astrology's energetic cycles. Be sure to tune in next week, same time, same place, to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.